Hey all, this is Erson, and welcome back to Eternal. Guys, I had the same background we got last time. We gotta change this up a little bit. I'm gonna do a little different this time, because, as you said, last time was kind of a primer on how the game is played. And I kinda wanna talk about how the game is designed a little bit. We'll get into, you know, more decks and some ranked or some limited formats later. But for now, I want to do something a little different. I'm actually a really big fan of how Eternal is designed, as far as the design of the factions and how it's put together, and the way the color pairings work, or the factions that come in there, and the colors themselves are very well defined. And I want to kind of, explain why I like it so much, why I think it's such a neat theme. And the other part is, you know, you gotta, if you're getting into this, kind of understand what you're getting into when you start moving through the colors and kind of get a feel for how the game is played. So, if that makes any sense whatsoever, this is probably going to be one of 3 videos, I think, on this topic. One will be this one. I guess they're probably pretty short. I don't know how much I have much to say about this, but I want to go through each of the colors here in main factions, I guess, or the colors is probably safe. We'll have another one about some of these factions, and we'll finish them up with the rest, because there's a bunch. Obviously, all the color pairings, you can do the math yourself on how many there are. So, without further ado, let's jump into it, shall we? So, I think the reason I like the way Eternal is designed, or rather it's well designed, not saying that's the only one designed like this, but in particular, is that I think for me, most in each of these colors actually can be boiled down to one key word that represents each of them. And I think we'll go through one at a time to kind of understand which facets of that theme you'll see in a lot of the factions. Again, it'll give you a good sense for how that's played. So I guess first we'll go with fire. Fire, I think, is best represented by impermanence, or I guess entropy. Would be a good sense of putting it there. This sounds really, I guess, asinine, but hear me out. So if you've played Magic, again, fire is like red, basically explosive, impulsive, that sort of stuff you'll get. And for me, impermanence and entropy, because it shows the two sides of it, right? So one, you have spells like Torch, which unsurprisingly is basically like Lightning Bolt. It does 3 damage. You got things that make torches, things that blow up. Hence impermanence. You've got stuff that's a little bigger, like Obliterate, things like that, right? So that's one part of fire. Quick, explosive, direct damage things that just make a big boom and then go away, right? Hence impermanence. The other part of the impermanence is temporary boosts in power to get something good. I haven't found a good way to link that one together. But for example, you'll see the next faction we're going to talk about, Time, has something that's more permanent as far as power building, outside of just playing power, or it would be the equivalent of land or mana. But for example, here you have a card called Rusty Grounded Motive. Probably one of the funnier cards here. I love the illustration. But it had, ignore the Berserk for now, but here, when it attacks, you get +1 power this turn. So this temporary power boosts something that red does. It's kind of like a sub-flavor, if that makes any sense. What's another good one that we can explain? Yeah, Tumble Bang. There, perfect. You get +3 power this turn when this thing dies. So again, the impermanence of that giving you a temporary boost to do something big, hopefully, but after that, you're spent. That's kind of the vibe of how fire plays. I mean, these are proper names here, obviously, because we don't want to get sued, but how it jives. That's the best way, I think, to define fire as a color. Now, next one we want to go into is time. And time is, I mean, the theme is relatively clear and simple, but the way it's applied is always interesting. So time's major theme is knowledge, and I kind of put it in 2 ways. One is in its depth, and one is in its breadth. So when you see depth, that's the development of power through knowledge, or how deep you can go and see what you can find. So cards like Initiative of the Sands here, +1 maximum power. Just by playing 1 out, you're already on turn 3. Again, kind of lots of these kind of intelligence units, kind of, so to speak. Even some functional cards here have this ability. Even a Merchant, which we have a new functionality, a new set, gives you +1 maximum power. Got a lot of stuff like this. You have Trailmaker, kind of this sort of vibe. Building power, ramping up. So unlike Magic, if you're not familiar with the equivalents, Magic, green is kind of your ramp color. In Eternal, your ramp color is yellow or time. So that's really where a lot of this comes in. Red is temporary ramp. This has like permanent ramp as long as these creatures stay alive. Obviously, okay? But don't even need to have it as creatures. You have Power Stone. Exactly here. Boom. +1 maximum power relic. So again, going from turn 2 to turn 4. Kind of stuff like that. That's where it jives. The other part is breadth, I think, because there's a wild world out there and knowledge of it is interesting. That's kind of the other major theme here. And you get crazy stuff in time. You get dinosaurs. Yes. It's mages and dinosaurs in time travel. It's a cool freaking faction. But yeah, you got plenty of dinosaurs. Neat stuff like the predatory carnosaur, which is super, super dope. So that's another like flavor of time. And you get these awesome ancient behemoth sentinels that you can explore and find. So that's kind of why I think knowledge in its depth and breadth, there's a good way to explain how the time action works, and you kind of know what you're getting into when you see that. Yeah, I mean, just dinosaurs, man. Come on. Dinosaurs and mages, it's badass. Okay. Next faction. Before this video gets too long and you're like, I'm hearing Urge talk for 10 minutes, and this is unnecessary. Alright, Justice. Let's talk about Justice. What is Justice? Justice represents, I mean, this is an easy one because they kind of tell you, but I think it fits beautifully. Justice represents order in both its protective and oppressive forms, right? So, Justice was a good one. Barricade, for example, you have a lot of, strong martial character to order, structure, hierarchy in a positive way and also in a negative way. So Barricade, good example of that. You got noble soldiers like, not what I'm talking about here because I can't spell for diddly. Crown Watch Legionnaire, again, lifesteal, endurance, basically vigilance. Kind of a basic creature, but you kind of have the vibe of this. In Justice, you also have a lot of heroes of the people, for example. Paladins, you'll see here. So again, that kind of protective, defensive form of order that keeps the world going as it needs to. Then you also have the flip side of it. You have, where is it? Detains. You have the ability to abuse that or not, depending on what kind of faction flavor you play. You also have these interesting, it's going to be another side, but you have these Valkyrie, which in the world of Eternal are basically humans augmented with these Magitech wings that go flying everywhere. Again, could be kind of going both ways. So you have a lot of that sort of thing. You have, where's another good example of oppressive order just from the faction? There we go, Press Gang, Crown Watch Press Gang, right? You're being forced and conscripted into work in the Crown Watch. So again, you have a little bit of that both of that flavor. Here you have a lot of Valkyries, like I said. You have Minotaurs as a major kind of creature type that you'll see a lot in Order. You'll also hear another good example, silencing things, right? Your Frontier Confessor, rooting out heresy, and things of that nature, which, for the Emperor and all, but you kind of have both vibes of the whole thing in Justice, among other things. Obviously, this is just a big overarching theme. So here you have a lot of solid units, a lot of things that can take a bit of a beating, build a board, and beat stuff down. It's kind of the vibe of Justice. So moving on from Justice, we can go to Primal. Primal is another one they kind of tell you, but again, very appropriate, so I kind of went with the standard definition. And Primal is the faction of nature, and I think the two sides here are both nature in its wisdom and nature in its fury. So again, you have some direct damage stuff, but there's also a lot of card draw here, and in a lot of control decks, you'll see that Primal is or combo decks, that Primal is a favored faction because you have ridiculous card draw engines, better than I think nearly everything else in the game as far as factions are concerned. You have Wisdom of the Elders. Right here, again, draw 2 cards, basic instant speed spell. You have stuff like, we're not going to go to multi-factions yet, we'll do that in the next vids. Strategize, again, draw 2 cards, put a card from your hand on the bottom, so again, kind of like a scry effect plus drawing. You have lots of scout effects. I mean, pretty obvious one. One's basically just a scout effect plus a cantrip. So lots and lots of ways to gain card advantage. You also have like the ferocity of nature going around somewhere. So here's an example of kind of a bit of both. Channel the Tempest. Do direct damage equal to the number of cards in your hand, but first you draw 3. So again, definitely a finisher in a lot of control decks, really powerful. Again, kind of a good representation of what Primal is concerned. Primal also has some dinosaurs as a sub-theme, some of the wilder ones, I think. You also have Yeti as a sub-theme, so kind of crazy dudes run around throwing rocks and stuff at people. You have kind of wild dragons hanging out. So a lot of this uncontrolled Natural fury you'll see a lot here. And also this idea of wisdom and showing your options and channeling that in some way. That's what you kind of have here. It's really kind of an interesting grab bag of a faction. It's gone through some identity crises, I would argue, over time, in that for a while it wasn't very good as a faction itself, but really good when paired with other stuff, other times less so. So it's an interesting way, an interesting take on the whole thing. So if you were playing, I guess, Magic, this would be kind of like green, but not really, because you don't have a lot of card drawing green. So, I mean, these factions all have the unique identity that didn't just cop off of another... well, for the most part, fire is fire after all. They didn't cop off of a lot of other like standard CCG tropes. So each of them have a neat spin on it, right? Like here you have that temporary power boost kind of thing. Here you have obviously the mages and dinosaurs. Here you have just straight up order. So that's kind of the vibe you have here of Primal. It's more or less the theme. And last but not least, we have Shadow. Shadow, again, unsurprisingly, has a pretty clear theme. Shadow's theme is subterfuge, both in its clever and its sadistic side. So here, Shadow can pretty much almost be layered onto Black. If you've played Magic the Gathering, again, that vibe is definitely here. Lots of removal. So I guess the prime example, Death Strike, kill a dude, instant speed. Lots of stuff like Suffocate. This is obviously the sadistic side of it, right? So Suffocate, which is interesting. Nightfall, not Nightfall. Extinguish would be a good one. Can give you a vibe on this, right? Yeah, so pretty clear what the theme there is. Lots of destruction, impending doom, things of that nature. Self-damage, again, purely in its sadistic glee, killing things, doing damage to yourself just for the pleasure of killing something else, and feeding on the pain, right? So lifesteal is also kind of a very big theme here. In Cold Blood, very good example of another kill thing that hates order. Very much a color hose card, which was a little controversial when it came out, let's say. So the other part of Shadow, obviously, is the clever nature of subterfuge. You'll have a lot of unblockable as a pretty strong sub-theme, and a lot of ways to kind of cleverly get through in order to do damage. So here, Minotaur Lighthoof, a good example. You may give another unit unblockable this turn. I guess the very appropriately named Thieves Pick. Again, a relic or a weapon that goes... a weapon, not a relic weapon. Goes on a unit that gives them unblockable, period. And with a little extra spellcraft, you can steal the top card of the enemy deck. So there's another one, like Pilfer. A good example is steal the top card of the deck, right? That's kind of that cleverness of the subterfuge side of things being shown. What's another good one? Burglarize. I mean, without beating a dead horse here, but again, all right, steal an enemy relic, put it into your hand. Interesting options there. So lots of direct kills, sacrificing things for benefits, lots of lifesteal. So if you're into that sort of feeling, if you've played Black in Magic the Gathering, you'll feel right at home here. It's not that different. A lot of recurrence using the graveyard, sort of traitorous things, stealing things. It's very much that kind of subterfuge, clever and sadistic. If you get those two in your head together, you'll understand how Shadow plays. And this theme is actually carried through pretty much every card very, very well. And as you play it more, you'll see how that kind of fits together. But I am very, very impressed with how well the color language is played with. There's a couple decisions, obviously. Certain abilities shouldn't be, I think, in certain factions that end up getting there or get distributed across. But usually it's in like a set of 5 cards, one for each faction. That was really the sub-theme of the little set. So that can be dealt with in general. But I hope that's helpful at least to get your head wrapped around what each of the colors in Eternal are, what they do, what their themes are. So if you do decide to get into the game, you kind of start understanding where that comes from and how it goes down. So again, just to recap for the sake of sanity, because that's what I learned. You're supposed to explain yourself at the end of things. Fire, again, remember, it's impermanence, it's explosive. You get temporary power, you get explosive solutions, and rather direct answers to everybody's problems. Time is the faction of knowledge, unquestionably so, in its depth and breadth. So you get cool stuff like dinosaurs and other weird stuff the world contains, but also permanent ramp and quick ways to get power through the application of knowledge and in-depth understanding of certain things. Justice is the faction of order, of course, both in its protective and oppressive natures. Again, lots of paladins, things of that nature. Martial skill and some heresy seeking if you're into that sort of thing. Primal, the faction of nature, in its wisdom and its fury, both reflected very interestingly. It's a really interesting faction, honestly, and I kind of like how they did this, basically. And last but not least, we have Shadow in the subterfuge, in both its cleverness and its sadism. So that's kind of the vibe of each of these. I hope that helped, like I said, as a quick little primer onto what the colors are like. We'll start with some of the pairings for the next video, so you kind of get a sense of what the factions are and how they're named and what their major themes are, and maybe you'll learn something, or maybe not, or maybe you'll hear me talk for 10 minutes and turn it off. Who knows? If you did enjoy this, though, let me know. Obviously, thumb it up, thumb it down. If you did thumb it down, tell me what wasn't good or what could be improved. Always appreciate that stuff. And yeah, hey, it's a little quickie just to get you more in the vibe of Eternal and see if you're into this sort of thing, because by golly gee, I definitely am. All right, Avaners, I'll see you all next time. Till then.